Okay, welcome everybody. Thanks for coming to my presentation on water security in Atinahua, Ecuador. I'm going to be presenting in English, so my apologies. Perhaps this video can be transcribed into Spanish, I'm not sure, but I really appreciate you joining me. We're going to save our questions for the end, and then we will entertain those. So I'm going to sort of power through, and if you have any questions at the end, we have somebody here to translate from Spanish. So let's just get and begin. Okay, so I'd like to briefly introduce myself. My name is Chris M. I'm a math professor at a community college in the United States, in the Kansas City, Missouri area. So home of the World Championship Chiefs, if you're into football Americano. So I came here to Ecuador to study water security, not only for the people here, but that has been a great joy, but also to bring things back to my students for them to work on and possibly come back. Now, if you're an engineer or thinking about working with water coming here, I do have some data that you might possibly think about collecting, and you might extend my project, so or make it yours. So I would hope that that would be the case. All right, so here we go. The first thing we're going to sort of talk about is the outline. So we have an introduction. We're going to walk around the water map of Atindahua, looking for main observations with the water system. And we're going to see there are some issues. So we're going to be looking for areas of growth and solutions. This is where you might come in, the next step for mapping and water security in Atindahua. And then finally, our conclusions. So let's quickly look at the landscape if you've never been here. It's a great place. Oops. Try again. And a little bit about the community. The estimated population is around 1,000 people. It's really hard to get a handle on that number. I thought I had it, but my source didn't seem to work out. The altitude varies between 2,850 and 3,070 meters. For people in the United States, that would be like 16,000 feet or so, really high. The community consists of locals and indigenous individuals. And most individuals we encountered were either children, 25 or younger, or older adults. So that was sort of an interesting observation, I thought. And here is just some general land facts about the Andean region. The Andean region, with the fertile inner Andean valleys and slopes, constitutes areas with the highest population density and the greatest pressure on natural resources, especially soil and water. Additionally, 80% of the families improve their economic income by increasing agricultural production. Climatic conditions are favorable for the development of pests and diseases, unfortunately, and we'll see some other issues to overcome. All right, so now we're going to go on a water mapping walk of the upper tanks of Atindahua. So maybe my third day here, it's been almost a month, so I'm sort of sad to leave, but my third day here, we decided to go on a water walk. So we wanted to see where the water came from. So I got my boots on, and it was a beautiful day, and we went up. So there I am at the top of the water system. So from the map to the left, you can see sort of the red circle of where I'm standing. And then there's a ridge roughly along here where the backside of the mountain is here. We have our water coming this way. So yeah, everything is very fertile up here, very soggy. I tripped and fell down at least 2 or 3 times and got nice and muddy. And you can see that maybe from this picture that the water was flowing really nicely that day. That was like around the 1st of March. As we advance up the tank, we are still in the upper catchment area, and we get to some issues here. So here is the tank circled in our water system here, but along our walk, we saw several of these disconnection areas up top with these pipes. So these pipes are, the connecting pipes are around 2.5 or 25 millimeters in diameter, whereas the main upper catchment tanks are more like 55 meters, 55 millimeters, or actually 50 millimeters in diameter. So these were some issues we encountered. We'll talk about this coming up. All right, advancing on the spring, we meet the springs, and at this point, you see a tank here with the springs. We actually, Walter, the person who maintains these tanks, actually uses a paint can to sort of bail out the water here. Those really need to be cleaned and maintained because water fills up there in the wet season, which is now. And you can see, yeah, between the springs, that water is really flowing fast. The water flow really depends a lot on the altitude and, of course, the precipitation. Okay, we're making our way up to the top, and here is what they call the Tapón, which means sort of a plug. And this storage tank is really full. Here you see Walter again cleaning this tank out, and it's important that that happens because once it's cleaned out, you can see the filter visible here. So there's sort of the 50 millimeter pipe and the filter right there. Finally, we make our way to sort of where the water turns. So if you're sort of following along, we started, and it's going to be making a big turn here around 0.3. Here you can see what's happened to the land. I gave this presentation last night, and there were some locals here, and they said 30 years ago, everything up there was native forest, was green, very beautiful. And there was a mist in the air pretty much all the time. Unfortunately, what's been happening is deforestation. So you can see sort of the deforestation here of the trees. Farming is very essential here. So it's sort of a you know, a sensitive problem, but you can see that the landscape's sort of been terraced here for farming and deforestation of native trees. All right, so if you can imagine that bend, and I'll show you the entire water map later, we're going down to the lower catchment tanks, and here we have the main 40 cubic meter tank. It's right here. We're standing on top of it, and this is the purification station. So interestingly enough, the purification station, what they do is they grab a scoop, they scoop in some chlorine and add it to the water and add it to the tank. So it's sort of, you know, not really sure why you add so much or how much to add, but that's how they do it. So, of course, we know that too much chlorine is definitely bad for people's health. So another thing we could monitor here is like, the level of chlorine that could be used at this station. Okay, we're going to follow the water down roughly this way to this tank number 2. And this tank here is the final tank before the water goes and serves the Atandahua community. So you can see this tank here, it's on the top of a very tall hill. So what happens is in this tank, really it uses static power to flow. So what happens is the static power builds up as the water enters, and it uses that potential energy to release down to the community. And finally, we have this map. Okay, so I think 2 days after we had our nice water walk, so that was that day 3 that I was here. We walked all around. It was great. So we had an opportunity to walk the actual water system, the water meters. So we walked along with Jorge, the water meter reader, and we were able to map out the GPS coordinates of the users for the residents here. So we got back out. This was a long day of walking, but it was very fulfilling. The day again was great. It was so awesome meeting the local community. They're so caring. They're interested in what you're doing. They invite you in. I had a chance to take a picture with some of them. Everyone would say "Buenos dias" and shake your hand. It's really a neat thing. All right. So when we were walking along our walk, I was sort of with my camera in hand, trying to talk to the locals. My friend wasn't translating for me, so he was making me talk Spanish because he's going back to Quito. So asking people things. And one thing that I heard was, oh, we didn't pay for, we're paying for all this water, but we're only a small family and we don't use a lot. So one thing we did see, was maybe this PVC pipe coming down to connect with the 25 millimeter pipe, and it's held on with something like this. It's like, what is that? Ah, well, here's your problem. You have water leak there. So water connection issues for the tubes. Also, unfortunately, farming practices, we'll talk about this later, but they use a lot of these chemicals and pesticides. And sadly, a lot of them are just discarded. Or in fact, this one was found really close to the water system. So there's a danger of these chemicals being introduced to the water system. So the results of our walk, the water meter grid serves around 95 households in Atandahua. In addition, there are several that don't use this water system. They have wells. And we were able to map about 79 residencies of Atandahua because some of these other ones were inaccessible. All right, so these were the potential, observations, which may be called issues that I saw, that we saw when we were walking. Of course, inorganic chemicals used for farming, deforestation of native trees, water losses, clogging of pipes, livestock near the catchment areas, lack of government regulations, it's a big one, and this is probably the one that we'll spend the most time on, lack of rain in the dry season. That was really one of the biggest issues that I was sent to tackle or try to figure out. So we're going to go through each one of these individually, starting with inorganic chemicals used for farming. So inorganic chemicals used for farming, we saw those pesticides. We don't really want them in our water system. So the key, when my time, as I've spent my time here, I think this is the key, really education. A lot of the people, especially the indigenous people, they don't have great education. So sometimes they have to learn by, actually seeing things in motion, seeing things happening until they believe it. A lot of these kids, they go to these English classes, which I've attended, and one way they learn is through their children. So education is key here, but there's also some programs we'll talk about later that are opportunities for them. So here we have left this beautiful organic farm that I was able to visit with my fellow volunteers and interns. It is in Saint-Simon, called Su Cambio por el Cambio, and you can see the beautiful, lush green grasses. Everything there is organic. They make and sell organic crops. They educate children there, so there's a school there, and it's very beautiful. They serve meals. They have great community and outside involvement. And so the second farm we were able to visit in Saint-Simon is actually one of our workers here who works with organic farming. His uncle, it was his farm here. And the right, you can see this, he actually is using a new technique with fertilizer from sheep, the sheep that he raises, combined with compost. And he uses that here just to demonstrate that this line of corn was planted organically on his farm. You can see this fence over here maybe. All this was planted 4 months earlier using chemicals, and it's much, much less than what's in the foreground. So education is definitely key. We got so much, I've learned so much through my time here about education with organic farming. The deforestation of native trees, one solution is, to plant them. So to replant the native trees, especially around areas that have been used for farming. This is so important because, as we'll see later, there is evaporation that happens when there aren't any trees. The trees help not only capture that moisture and keep the moisture in the soil, but also the leaves help stop that evaporation from happening. Here you can see on the left, there's an organic farm in Saint-Simon. That's, again, Sebastian's uncle, Fernando, I think. I'm not really sure that that's his name. But here's the line of trees that are planted here. And you can see how great the grass is down here. And here's my roommate, Jack, and he and I are planting trees on the land below El Terreno. And I just planted this one and he's up there. All right. Water loss areas, disconnections, we've seen those. So what's the solution? Inspect and maintain visual leaks. So the water manager, as they go around, it's important for them to do maintenance. Maybe the citizens could pay, $2 or $3 more a month to have issues like these fixed, like right on the spot, or, so they wouldn't have to pay so much money for water that they're not really using. This is just important to keep up with and maintain. So to sort of detect these leaks and anomalies, you can install flow meters for to monitor the pressure. All right, and we've seen these. Next, clogging of pipes. So sadly, there's not a lot of sanitation. There is sanitation, but it's not handled in a mass way. A lot of not so much education with recycling and things. So sometimes trash and other things clog the pipes, and of course that restricts the flow. So there has been a plan in place for a while about this water irrigation plan. So it has best practices. It hasn't been installed yet, but it's a beautiful document. It has all these recommendations. You can use some of them and modify them to the water system as well. Also, education and sensible sanitation availability would help out. So here is just sort of an excerpt from the Atandahwa water irrigation plan. So clean the grid, maybe not weekly, but definitely important to clean the grid, removing sediment to prevent garbage from entering the system. That could be at the tanks. It needs to be at the upper tanks and the bottom as well. I don't know about the valve boxes, but the tanks could be painted because they take a lot of, oh, let's see. I'm going to welcome. I'm going to mute the person that came in. Okay. All right. Thanks for coming. So maybe not valve boxes, but definitely the tanks. Here we can sort of avoid this, but we can take on regular maintenance. We can't really shut down the service that's happening. And then I'm going to say that the pipe that's exposed to the sun, maybe we could use, UPVC pipes to prevent damage there. All right. See what our next one is. Livestock. Okay, so maybe you can see in the distance, maybe not, but there are livestock here. So on our walk in the upper catchment, you saw some of cows and sheep, and it's important to the locals, but maybe not around the catchment area. We don't want really livestock species entering the catchment. So recommendation would be to just keep livestock, 10 meters away. Hopefully we could do that without, fences. All right, here's a big one. So the lack of government laws. So there is a lot there are a lot of initiatives that the people here have, and they're great initiatives. The things that I'm talking about, and we'll talk about in a little bit, are really important, but they can't happen without the government being there to aid people and to protect these initiatives. So, it's important to come and do projects like these, where we're going to collect and present relevant and compelling data. They really need this to quantify the needs for these initiatives, and then the stakeholders and people that come will provide the evidence and data to give to engineers who can advocate the government for regulations and aids. This is so important, and it's a continuous fight. Finally, lack of rain in the dry season. This is the big issue that, you know, we're going to be talking about. So what can we do? Construct a reservoir. That would be great. And we'll talk about that. That will be sort of the last thing I talk about. And then incorporate household strategic initiatives. So one of the things that I was helping with mainly for calculations for my students when they get back was this idea of a gray water system. So it uses the gray water from the house during the season, and it goes through these purification tanks, a degreaser, and then another tank and another. So the more tanks, the cleaner the water will be, and it comes out, and it can be stored in a pond, or it can be diverted into crops. So this could be a great way to get water from what you use in the kitchen, in showers, from the rain, etc., to help aid with farming in the dry season. Also, if you come to Atandahwa and visit Casa Comunal, you'll see these 4 buckets here. And this is a bucket system where the water, the gray water from the house and precipitation enters a bucket. It gets filtered by rock, by sand, and collected and reused in the kitchen. So we reuse the water to wash the dishes in the kitchen. Probably not drinkable grade, but the reuse is going to help us conserve that water. All right, so finally, we're going to be talking about, you know, the dry season and how much water we can actually expect to catch up at the top of the tank. So this is the sad story of the rainfall in the town really close to us. It's probably the closest one to get data from, Wanuho, just down the road at like a few kilometers. And you can see the last 12 years that rainfall has gone down. You can sort of make out the difference between the wet and the dry season, right? You can see that, but the sad thing is it's sort of decreased, as mathematicians would say, probably linearly until here. So this is something that really caught my eye. This has been in the last year, so I want to show you something here. Okay, this is just zoomed in on the last part here. Wow, these levels look higher than what we have on the left, but when you look at the scale, this is 10% of the levels here. Just totally amazing. So instead of like 750 millimeters, this is 75 millimeters. You can really see that it has been extraordinarily dry the last year here. Now, I think that this is an anomaly, but the trend and what we know about global warming and everything has really, and climate change has really affected people here. So I bring this chart to you to sort of show you all, like, oh, look at all this. So I've sort of tracked all the precipitation data, and you can see this is just sort of to highlight, you know, in the last 12 years, 2 of the driest months have been in 2021, and the other 10 have been in 2022. But I'm also going to use this rainfall data. We're going to use a 3-year average to sort of try to see how much catchment we could get. So I'm using a 3-year average for estimations here. All right. So we're going back up on the water map, sort of to show the potential catchment areas. So when we use Google Earth and we're back up at the top of the mountain, we saw that there was this large area that probably had the catchment. that's going to go in the community. It's a really big area, comparably. So it's about 1.3 to 1.5 square kilometers. And you can see roughly the reason why we chose that is because of the gradient to the right. You can see that the water is essentially below that 0.3, and we have these gradients that sort of match up. All right. So when we look at the entire upper map, the water flows through this area into the potential catchment area. And then, of course, it makes its way. So we're going to try to be using this area to estimate our catchment. And we talked about evaporation, or this word that is hard for me to say, evapotranspiration, which is essentially how much of the liquid gets returned to the air. With the deforestation, currently through several sources, we found it to be about 57%. With totally forest trees, probably 30, 35 years ago, it would have been more like 5 or 10%. So here are the results. So this was sort of surprising to me. So we're taking in account the precipitation, and then the upper and the minimum and maximum catchment here to see how much we should expect to catch per month and annually. And we're using that 3-year precipitation data also with the evapotranspiration. And let me sort of show you our results. So it looks like, hey, this is a ton of catchment that we're getting here. And even in the dry months, you know, that 40 meter cubic meter tank should be full, even in the dry months. So why is that happening? Well, you know, it's probably well, let me tell you. So according to our results, you know, probably only a fraction of that water in the catchment area will be realized. So when I made that map up there, I'm not really totally sure that that will all be realized. In fact, theoretically, that 40 cubic meter tank should always be filled, but as we know, that's not the case. Reforestation could occur at an altitude where farming is difficult to decrease evapotranspiration. So there are possibilities to help and get more catchment. Finally, you know, provided there are water shortages, which have been felt here during the dry season, a reservoir could be conceived around that upper catchment area for emergency use. So we compiled this map of the entire system, and you can see sort of the upper tank. So this would be the origin of the piping. The upper tanks are in red here. You can see the water line. So we estimate with this gradient that the water is sort of following the road down to the lower tanks. So there's the 40-gallon tank, 40 Americans, right? 40 cubic meter tank. And down here is Casa Comunal and the area that's served. You might notice these two features up here. Circled in blue is a possible area. That's where we had the catchment area. This could be a possible area for a reservoir where you could store water for use in the dry season. You can see all these like little black spots in here. These are really high areas. So this is very difficult for farming here. And the water goes around this area. So potentially this could be reforested with natural trees, and it could help with that evapotranspiration data. All right, so let's talk about next steps. And this is where, potentially if you're coming here, you might want to think about the possibilities or the realities of some of these. So rainfall can vary a lot here. In Wanuho, it can be raining like crazy, and here it might not be at all, or vice versa, or even at the top of the mountain, the Catchment area. So a weather station could be installed to better predict the rain and evapotranspiration data in the water system. Flow rates are a big thing. So during my internship, I went to a water meeting and I figured out how to find, I was always concerned about the flow, like how are we going to find the flow? Because this was like a thing for my students to observe when I get back. So I found out that a way to measure the flow was to collect water in a bucket and use a stopwatch. And we found out that this water was flowing really quickly, 1 liter per second. But that's not the best way maybe to find flow rates. So perhaps like installing these flow meters at strategic places could help get data in real time and provide more information in the hands of engineers, in the hands of maintenance workers to detect leaks and flow pressure problems. Advocate for work towards installation of the proposed Atandahua irrigation plan. So I had the opportunity to meet with the irrigation operator. I had a chance to try to translate his entire Spanish, 69-page Spanish document into English. And in there are some great ideas, very thorough information, great education for the community. So keep working on implementing this plan. It's going to be a fight against the government, but if this was realized, this could take a lot of pressure, literally and figuratively, off the water system because it could be used for irrigating crops. And finally, it was proposed to me, maybe we could gather data from a similar source which has that native tree cover and see just how much it could reduce the evapotranspiration data if it were back to its natural environment. So how much would planting more trees help? So when I was thinking about putting all this together, along my journey, I found that, it's really hard to change things, especially with government things, but I heard that, and it's true, Ecuador has taken action towards giving nature its own rights equal to humans. So Pachamama is the land, the nature in Ecuador, and it does roughly have the same rights as humans, although this hasn't been practiced too much. It was installed maybe 10 or 15 years ago. But if there was some way to leverage this, because people who aren't stakeholders will steal the water from the top of the catchment area. They will deforest the native trees because they don't have any investment in it. If we can provide data, if we can maybe leverage something like this was just an idea of mine, then maybe progress can be made. So it's going to take a lot more volunteers, a lot more interns, community members getting together and helping to fight this fight. I really appreciate you staying with me this long. So we're at the conclusions part. During my stay in Atandahua, it has opened my eyes to a world unknown to me. This is the first time I've traveled away from North America, so it's a totally new world to me. It's beautiful. The people are so hardworking. They're genuine and kind. Unfortunately, they suffer from shortages of potable water. After various meetings and interactions, I am encouraged to see how the community unites in finding some solutions to their water issues. Ultimately, solutions are going to start with community education. Strategic and sustainable environmental practices, and the majority of people have to buy in. So education to start, and then people will buy in, and then change will take place. Continued monitoring and maintenance of the water system, so important by the community water manager and other stakeholders, so that water flows freely even in the dry season. Implementation of forward-thinking initiatives and research, such as the reservoir we mentioned for the dry season. That irrigation plan, pivotal. Reforestation would be a great idea. Organic farming practices and other community efforts will go a long way and hopefully helping my friends here. So here are my sources. And finally, thank you so much for watching my presentation. Muchas gracias. And here is a beautiful photo that I had the opportunity to take of my favorite mountain, El Chimborazo. And it has a ring around it on this day. So I wanted to go ahead and open up to some questions if we had some. So feel free to unmute and ask questions. I do maybe have a translator. I don't know. Maybe not, but.
I have one question. How useful do you think your research will be for the community and for the care of water resources?
I think that the main, thanks for the question, Christian. I think that the main thing that the research is going to do is going to provide them with a better layout and more data for their water system. So they'll have that in place. As people change and more people come in, they can keep adding to that system. But I really believe that the data that we collected is a great start. And I feel like the more people who come here and help and use that data and add to that data, it's going to aid the engineers in helping to get government approval to maybe build some of these tanks, reservoirs, reforest the land, etc. Good question. Other questions?
Hello.
Hi.
I just have a question. I'm not sure about. I'm not sure I understand all you said, but you say that we can't maintain and elevate the tanks without the approval of the government.
Thanks for the question, Nathan. My understanding is that to make the system better, to do some of these initiatives that I've researched here, that there needs to be government approval. So, for instance, like to reforest the land. The thing is that like when you plant trees up there, the locals want to farm. I mean, that's how they make their money. So they can come and cut them down like as fast as you can plant them. So if there was government approval to buy that land, it could be reforested, whereas still the locals would have an opportunity to farm around the area. We would just use the land that's really, not fit for farming that well. So that's one example of something that could be done there. And also the irrigation plan has been in the works for a long time. It just needs to have sort of government approval and laws that will help it be passed through. Hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
But, so the plan is to present a plan to the government and wait their approvals, and after that we can do something.
Yeah, and I think that that's what's been happening in the past. So I think that it's important to keep working, keep gathering information and data here, but also just, educating the community. If you educate the community, then you don't really need the government on your side, because the community will buy in and they'll do these things. So I think that educating the community can go a long way into, helping out, the environment and the water system. So perhaps, I mean, with a little education, people wouldn't dump their fertilizer around the water system, or people might pay a few extra dollars to have their pipes maintained. So I think that I understand your idea of the waiting game, and it sucks, but I really feel like if there was more education, then you could circumvent some of the government issues.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, of course. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for your question. I think I see something in the chat. Let's see. Okay. I am not really good at Spanish, but it says, let me see if you all can see this in the chat. So it says, I would like to know if you can do something in the lab to analyze the data to drink for the people of Atandahua. Perfect. Okay, I think that was what you're saying. So yeah, I think that lab results are going to definitely help with this. In fact, I have the maintainer of the land, Joshua here. Maybe you could answer some more of that.
Yeah, so what he's asking is whether we've done any lab tests on the quality of the water.
Okay, so
buenas tardes. Gracias por la pregunta, Freddy. Entonces, ojalá me pueden escuchar bien. No hemos hecho los análisis porque en los lugares que hemos investigado son muy costosos, como $250 para hacer un análisis. Entonces, si alguien sepa alguna otra manera que se podría realizar a bajo costo, sería muy útil para nosotros. Porque si, por ejemplo, aquí en la casa comunal tenemos un filtro básico con arena y con carbón y eso, y el agua sale limpio, y en el tanque de reserva no hay algas, entonces parece que está funcionando, pero no podemos probar. Entonces estas pruebas serían muy útiles para nosotros. I'll just translate that quickly into English. So there was a question as to whether we've done any lab analyses of the water. Unfortunately, here at the moment, from our research, they cost about $250 for each test, which is beyond our means at the moment. But obviously, if we were able to do that, that would go a really long way to learn about water safety. And for example, outside the Casa Comunal, we have a barrel system with sand and charcoal filter. And the last storage tank hasn't got any algae in it, so it seems to be working, but we can't test and therefore kind of prove and champion the fact that this works and could be replicated and the water is safe enough to drink. So if there was a way of doing that, then that would be really useful.
Thanks, Joshua. All right, let's see. New message. Okay, of course. He says thank you. All right. Any other questions?
How was the cultural impact of living in a community because you came from the United States? So how do you feel to live between the mountains and indigenous people?
Thanks for the question, Christian. Like I said, this was my first time traveling outside of North America, and I didn't really know what to expect. When I got here, my mind was blown. I knew, okay, so this is gonna sound really, it's gonna sound really bad, but there are so many things that we take for granted in the United States. And when I got here, I was like, oh my goodness, how am I gonna live here? I wasn't really thinking that, but I was sort of thinking that, but I knew that it was gonna be a great opportunity. People here have to work harder for things. And I really realized that, you know, it was a way of life that I could get into. I don't know if I could live this way for the rest of my life, but it really made me appreciate what I had, but more, you know, about how people actually had to work for things here. And it took me about a week to sort of blend in, but once I blended in and got more comfortable, I sort of realized like how maybe some people that just got into America would feel like when everybody's speaking a language that you don't understand. But people here are so beautiful. They're so patient with you and so friendly. Everywhere I walk, they're like, buenos dias, ¿cómo estás? And they're so friendly, so welcoming. If you don't understand something, they'll be very patient. They'll like, say that again in Spanish. And like I was going grocery shopping and I was like trying to pronounce the Spanish word for like some spices and things that I need. And she was like, show me the list, give me your list. And she's like, oh yes. She's like, we don't have those, but the people over there do. And like, where are you from? It was like, everybody was just so beautiful. That is something that I'm definitely going to miss that you don't see back home. Even in the Midwest, people are friendly, but they're not friendly like this. It's just, and they open their homes, they tell you their stories, they're so raw. And I mean, I've had stories here where people just break down crying, and I am not like totally comfortable with that, but it's just like so much emotion, but also so much interest in you and so much thankfulness. They're like, oh, you're doing such a great job for the community. Almost everyone that asked me to share my story says that. So I've really enjoyed my time here. I look forward to coming back. I'm hoping that I can take my family next time or my students. That's maybe a next thing for me to take my students back here. But everybody has been so hospitable here. I'm be ready to come back in a heartbeat.
Thank you.
Thanks for the question. I appreciate it. So yeah, so if you're planning on coming here, it might be different from where you live. It might be the same, I'm not sure. But one thing you can count on is friendliness, safety, really. One thing I did observe that was different from back home is I didn't see any homeless people here at all. And that's so much different than back home. All right. Any other questions or comments? Okay.
I have one last question.
Oh, okay.
Do you think that you used more the knowledge that you already had when you came to El Terreno, or that you acquired new knowledge that allowed you to develop the project?
Yeah, so I think that I definitely had the chance to apply my new knowledge I've learned there. My partner Christian, the engineer, he helped me out a lot in learning some good ways. So definitely, if you come here, you're going to have support as an intern. So I learned so much from him that I didn't know about in my life. I learned so much every day, and that we can apply like directly to the project. Also, traveling opportunities. So I had an opportunity, of course, to visit San Simon, and you can see how instrumental that was into, you know, my document and my research here. And yeah, so yeah, I learned a lot, and it was really directly applicable to what we were doing here. Also, I want to say that I'm a mathematician. I'm not like working with water. I'm not normally working with water. It's just it's something. Water is something that's very near and dear to me as a person personally, and it's so important. But I didn't know a lot about it, so I went from like ground zero to you know, my knowledge has probably increased 1,000% on water and water systems. So I appreciate Christian for that, and the community. I've learned so much. So if you come as an intern, you will have those same opportunities. All right. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you coming, and you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much, Nathan.